Today we have myself presenting and Crystal Ryan is our moderator. Please don't forget, if you have a question, enter it in the question part of the console and we'll get to those towards the end of the webinar. Just before I do start, can I say thank you for attending today. I know it's report writing time at school and I do remember what that used to be like, so much appreciated. Okay, couple of things. One, today's webinar is where it's all heading, what's trending in e-learning and how your smart product fits into this. It's probably very timely because I know that starting tomorrow EduTech is on and Smart will be represented there. If you're at EduTech, please feel free to come and make yourself known to us at either the Canon stand or I think we're at Integrate and maybe even at the DEET STEM space. So, but I'm always interested in those kind of conferences, in part because it's where you do see what's trending and what's happening, and it's a great place to meet with other people and hear about where education's going in terms of technology. So I would like to stress at this point that we do these webinars because Smart's very much an education company. We're very adaptable to what's happening in classrooms, and classrooms have changed pretty significantly over the last little bit. And we try to respond to change with innovations to both our hardware and software. And in fact, one of our up-and-coming webinars is about Smart's directions in hardware and software. So keep an eye open for that one. So anyway, today's webinar, e-learning, as we know, it's changed at an incredible rate. I think even 3 years ago I couldn't have said what was happening now would be happening. So, pardon me, I've just got a bit of a cold, sorry. STEM, it's science, technology, engineering and maths, and it's STEAM, which some people would know is STEM with arts in it, which I think is a fantastic model. Coupled with all the digital content so we have now in terms of curriculum. So we're seeing an amazing change through what's being dictated in terms of curriculum change, but also through how STEM's coming into most schools. Today's objective is to talk briefly, and I do say briefly, these are just really a balcony view of some of these changes and how really Smart can enhance that these new directions in learning in the classroom. One thing I would suggest, and I think I said this in a previous webinar, if you're interested in how to keep up, one thing to do is to go to conferences like EduTech, but also white papers like the Horizon Report. Really, they give you a great insight into where digital technology is heading in terms of education. I sort of think it as using my crystal ball to get ahead. I'd really strongly recommend the Horizon Report if you want to peek at up-and-coming educational trends in technology and how they're likely to impact on teaching and learning. I particularly recommend that you look over it if you're creating an e-learning plan for your school, or if you're planning new spaces, or for some people even a new school. So, but really good place to get your head around this stuff. So one of the things I've noticed, and we do go into a lot of schools, is that some of the newer technologies that we're seeing can be fairly student-centric, and sometimes that can be a little bit isolating. The pictures I've got in front of me I think are probably a good indication of that. They're very much kind of not necessarily collaborative, but particularly if you look at VR or AR, so virtual reality or augmented reality in schools, it can be very much a one-on-one kind of experience. I think where we see that, and that's not all the cases of course, but sometimes technology can create a barrier to the teaching, and I think we need to be a little bit careful of that, and we'll talk more about that as the webinar progresses. I think one thing that the front of room display, your smartboard, helps is it reduces this issue for us. So something to be aware of, and maybe as a teacher, if you look into your classroom, have a think about other devices creating a distraction or an isolating effect rather than enhancing learning. That's a question that should be key to what's going on in the classroom. Okay, so how does Smart Learning Suite and your smartboard fit into all this? So if you're running a 3D printer or using virtual reality or simply running a coding club, the smart front of room display can still be a significant learning asset for you, and you should really be leveraging it. It really does bridge the digital world, and it can stimulate and facilitate discussion and problem solving, particularly if you bring students up to the board, which I've talked about before, but it's essential, I think, for what happens in the classroom. Today's webinar is really just a balcony view, a brief overview of what's going on. Over the next couple of terms, we'll probably drill deeper into some of these topics and how they relate to SMART. But basically, what we're trying to do is just give you an insight in what we're seeing and what the impacts of these technologies might be. So coding's a really obvious place to start. It's something that for some schools it's fairly new. Some schools have been going for maybe 36 months. But the thing that I've noticed is it's fairly widespread through schools. There's lots of platforms we can use. Scratch and Minecraft are very popular, and there's some quite senior, more sophisticated packages which are also free. I think one of the advantages of coding is that there's no consumables, so very little cost to a school, so it's an easy place to start. It's very, very well supported. I've put a website there, code.org. Great place to start, and it's also highly engaging for students and tends to be open-ended. Quite often I've found with students where I've worked with them with coding, you'll be doing something like Scratch and they'll go home and continue, and you'll find that it becomes quite absorbing for them. So, so how can we leverage that with our smartboard? So one thing I think we can do is a student working on Scratch at a computer by themselves, it's not necessarily as powerful as you going through a Scratch programming at the board, or maybe demonstrating an exercise that they've attempted and had issues with themselves, and then maybe discussing with them. That thing of the board being used and all students seeing it means that they can compare and discuss their solutions with yours. I know that Helen Lacey from SMART recently created a notebook about coding. She did things like showed how to use Scratch, gave a history of coding, where it came from, and gave resources. And we'll probably be able to put that up on our website for you to use, or we might put it at Smart Exchange. Probably another option with coding is to perhaps use something like a lab activity, and use a lab activity like rank order to reinforce a programming sequence in an enjoyable, fun-filled way. Again, I'll try and incorporate that into Helen's notebook that we put up. But coding, great starting point, easy. I know kids engage with it, but you can still use your smartboard to facilitate learning through coding at the front of the room, rather than just the student's device with themselves. The next step from coding is obviously robotics. It's normally what people step up to from coding. Robotics has a higher cost than coding, but obviously has some strong links back through it through problem solving and programming. Really competitive outcomes. It's very hands-on for students and they see immediate results. The nice thing I've noticed in classes is it builds resilience in terms of the students being learners. Often they fail with what they do to redo and try again, and that actually resilient learning, I think, is a really powerful, that idea of grit for students, powerful quality that something like robotics engages. And the other thing that I like about it, it's well supported, and there's great competitions such as Robo Soccer, etc., which is Australia-wide. Again, I can put up a link to a website for that for you. So in terms of using your smart products with robotics, some of the notebook shapes, easy to drag out onto a page, really easy to create flowcharts to show robotic movements for students to problem solve from. Another way we can use our smartboard is to actually video the robotics coupled to a discussion around what's happening, and maybe again with trial and error, if things don't go the way they should, maybe discussing that, and that can be tied to a notebook for students to actually annotate to. Again, some of the lab activities would be great to reinforce the learning in a fun way at the board. So robotics, I'd see step coding to robotics, higher costs but great outcomes, but I still see places where we can actually use our smartboard to enhance the learning. Okay, 3D printing. 3D printing has a lot of links back to smart, and I'll actually give you a little demo here in a second, but basically, unbeknownst to me, I found out a few years ago that 3D printing's been around for 25 years. It's not a new technology, but probably for us in schools, the pricing of 3D printing is allowing it to be used in schools. Nice thing with 3D printing, there's lots of free modelling software of varying sophistications, and the great thing is there's lots of repositories of models like Trimble 3D Warehouse that makes models very accessible. Downside that I've noticed, it can be very slow. Sometimes I know schools will print overnight, but there's a fair bit of classroom management around all this unless you've got lots of printers, but things are speeding up and the materials are improving. The nice thing with 3D printing, I've seen it used in lots of cross-curricular things. So a good example, we're doing ancient Egypt in SOS, but in our technology or STEM class, we're actually creating a sphinx's head, a pyramid, etc. So nice cross-curricular links. And even to maths, we can print out maths shapes where we used to maybe cut them out of paper. I've noticed too that a lot of resellers do really good work around schools. One in particular that I like, 3D Printing Systems. They have an educational newsletter that they send out, and they've got some really good ideas for schools to use their 3D printers in the classroom. I just want to give you a little look. Smart's done a lot of work around 3D. So in Notebook, if we were doing 3D printing, a couple of things that I'd like to show you. If I go to the gallery and I just type in 3D, you'll notice that embedded within Notebook are some 3D objects. Basically, I just pull them out. They become available to me. That'll just render in a second. And again, you can see that that's an interesting 3D object. Great way to start the discussion around what is 3D. You can see I can rotate this in several different axes. So interesting from the point of view of students at the board and discussing this. But once you're in your gallery, if we actually have a look, you'll see that I've got a way of getting out to Trimble Warehouse and also to Smart Exchange. And I've just got those couple of sites up on the on my computer here. So I've just gone to Trimble 3D Warehouse. So Smart links straight out to this warehouse. So basically I can search on an object. So let's try pyramid. I can search on an object. You can see there's lots of pyramids there. I don't know if there's one that I would like for ancient Egypt, but perhaps there is. I can click on the object. Here's a good one. And then I can actually download it. And the instructions around how to download for your notebook file, and I'll just go back here for you. So written down here for you. So a link straight out to Trimble Warehouse. Your other option with your 3D objects with Smart is you can go to Smart Exchange, and within file type, so your normal starting point is here, but I'm actually going to file type. I'm clicking on 3D content, and what I'm able to do then is I can actually download 3D objects straight from Smart's Exchange. Another site that I don't mind is I think you pronounce it Thingiverse. So, but again, lots of printable 3D objects for students to download and use. So great content for 3D objects. It's an area that Smart's been working in with its notebook for a while. So there's a few options for you there in terms of discussing and using Smart to help facilitate your 3D printing. The other option, if you haven't used SketchUp, maybe download a copy of SketchUp. use it at the board to create and design briefs and problem solve 3D objects for students. I know that I used SketchUp with a Year 8 class a few years ago now, and the interesting thing for me was that we just did, I think it was a house and a garage. 2 years later, one of the students who I'd worked with came to me and he showed me he'd actually he got so involved in it, he created a whole street. So, but it became almost like a hobby for him. So, unbeknownst to us as teachers, sometimes those kind of outcomes are there for us in terms of learning from students. So, that was a very pleasant surprise for me as a teacher, seeing him showing me that 2 years later. Another trend that we're starting to see is augmented reality. It's probably not as apparent in classes as coding or 3D printing, but if you've never seen augmented reality, it's very easy to use. Basically, you take your device, you point your device at a trigger, which could be a picture or a QR code, and when you do that, basically an action takes place. So the QR code or becomes a trigger for something to happen. So a video may show, a 3D animation, a game may pop up. So if you think Pokemon Go, something along those lines. Originally I thought probably a bit of a novelty value. My starting point was with one called Zoo Kazam, which again I think is a really interesting one to show students. But the more I've looked at it, the more I've realised that there's some great classroom applications. So there's an amazing amount of free apps for augmented reality. Just search on your iPhone or on your Play Store. Just put in augmented reality. If you get swamped by that, a couple I recommend to get you started, or Rasma is really, really good, and AugThat. And again, to just give your kids an insight into what it is, I would suggest Zoo Kazam as a starting point. So really, when kids first see it, the ones who haven't played with Pokemon Go, they find it quite exciting. There's textbooks coming. Pop-art books are interesting. They're probably a little bit more primary, but they're actually using augmented reality as part of the textbook. So things like that, maybe look at pop-art books if you want. I do think they're probably still available in Australia, but I can see it's not as apparent yet in terms of education, but augmented reality is definitely an e-learning trend that we can do. How we use Smartboard with that? Again, augmented reality, as we can see from the picture there, the child's pointing the device at the code, something being triggered. It's an individual experience. Because it is just a picture or a QR code that's going to trigger this, there's nothing to stop you putting that up at the smartboard and having several students have that experience at once at the smartboard. So, and again, you can annotate to a notebook about their experience. So, okay, just moving along. Virtual reality. Google Cardboard, because of its cost point, really leveled the playing field for us here. There are expensive gaming options, and some of your students probably have those, but you can get fairly sophisticated headsets now that will run with a phone for as little as $40. Google Cardboard, again, cheap option, great in schools. You only need 4 or 5 sets really in a classroom to make this work. There's an amazing amount of educational-based apps already available. Again, just search on virtual reality. Virtual reality is highly immersive. So, you know, where else can a student peer inside a human body or look into an open trench? It just can't be done. So, you know, it's the one thing I've seen that I go, in terms of education, this is going to be huge. It's not here yet, but I think in the next 24 months, I think we'll see increasingly VR coming into classrooms. I know some schools are doing this already as a learning experience. I think be careful, it's not just about the novelty value. Make sure that you are looking at how is this improving learning outcomes. Make sure you tie it to your curriculum and your pedagogy, and also make sure it's relevant to the topic. Don't just give the kids an experience that's isolated. So the only thing with virtual reality, as we can see from our picture there, is it's very insular. It's exciting and immersive, but very insular experience for students. So how do we collaborate and tease out the learning? So once students have had their VR experience, get them to describe it to each other and annotate it into a notebook. Maybe pose a question like, why is this a different way to learn? You could also use, say, smart response or shout it out to get insights into their learning and their experience to generate a class discussion. So again, we're using the smartboard and notebook to actually leverage the learning rather than it just be an isolated experience for the students. I have included today AI. I know it might seem strange, but I just think if we're looking to where are things going, I think there's been a lot of hype about AI and what it'll mean to the world. But as it impacts, Siri is a good example. So, but you know, as it impacts, I think we'll see that it will have impact in education in schools. It's a way off yet, but we can already play in this area. So students often create images which are enhanced or interactive. Sometimes in gaming, they're quite used to making avatars for themselves that are responsive and animated. So if we can take this and make these responsive, we're able to demonstrate this concept of AI. So if you try something, an app like Morpho or Telegami, that's not a bad introduction for students. At this stage, I'd probably be introducing the concepts of artificial intelligence and maybe using it to talk about the world that these students are going to enter, rather than use it perhaps as a, like I would be coding to enhance learning. But I think it's something we can't ignore and something we need to be thinking about. There are already avatar programs that if I put a camera on a smart board, the avatar can have facial recognition, can eye track, and can actually interact with students. So this is already possible. But at the very least, I think it's worthwhile investing in this as a talking point with students. I'm hoping that I might be able to see something along those lines at Edutech. So in summary, just even though we're using differing technologies, particularly along the lines of coding, 3D printing, augmented reality, I think it's still important to try to use your smart hardware and software to form a bridge to things like discussion, problem solving, reinforcing the learning and deepening the understanding. Particularly, again, I'll stress with students coming up to the board to have an interaction. So, and the nice thing for me always is we're trapping that learning and understanding in our smart notebook. Don't forget, all our webinars are hosted at YouTube and also can be accessed at our website, and any resources, say Helen's notebook on coding, we'll happily put those up there for you. There's our website, just so you know, I'll just show it for you. It's anz.smarttech.com. So we may even do a screen grab of that for you, but just search on anz.smarttech.com and you should find us. If you have any ideas for future webinars, please put them in the inquiries box there, and yeah, we'll just happily do anything that you would like us to do over the next 12 months. So, and as I say, we'll probably drill more into some of these topics that I've very briefly covered off on today. So, okay, we'll just talk to Crystal and see if we've got any questions. Crystal, are you there?
Hi, Kev. First question, do you see any other significant trends coming in the near future?
Great question, thank you. So, look, technology is always changing. With most technology, I think what we find is initially it's too expensive for schools. That's not uncommon. But eventually, as technology becomes more pervasive, it becomes more popular, it comes down in price. So AR and VR, good example of that. I would suggest again, have a look at the Horizon report. I find it quite an eye-opener. I think the important thing for me as an educator is I think about the world that the students are going to enter and their world of work, and what they need to know is going to be totally different than what I was teaching even 5 years ago. So I think there will be new significant trends. Read the Horizon report, and that may be a good future gazing kind of topic for one of our webinars, like to really delve look far forward and talk about what schools might be like in 10 years. So, but thanks for that question. Yeah, I will cover off on that maybe in another webinar, I think. So, okay, Crystal, any other questions?
I've got one more here.
Thanks, Chris.
Probably more of a comment. What you say is interesting, but I struggle with the cost of implementing these new technologies and the time that it takes.
Again, great question. Having been a teacher, yeah, like you get drawn 10 different ways, as we know, by 10 different new innovations. I think the good thing with some of what I've spoken about today is there is some funding around STEM, but really with anything new, I suppose it's really a question of priority. You know, it's professional learning versus funding versus expenditure on hardware and software. We always, I think, need to be looking to, you know, what's the future of learning, what's the future of work, but it probably really is the individual school's call out. I don't think we can ignore this stuff. I think, you know, a 3-year plan around e-learning and what technology is doing is probably important for a discussion. I used to find that even just showing a little video at a staff meeting to elicit some discussion around what AI might mean to education or what VR might mean to education doesn't mean you're going to have to go away and invest in all that with your time, but just to start thinking about that. But I think planning and prioritising, thinking about professional learning, thinking about your funding model and your expenditure over 3 years is probably what's important, because I don't think we can just ignore this stuff, but I do think we need to field to get it right, and I don't think we can really load up teachers like tomorrow you're going to be the STEM coordinator and I need you to know all this, and you're only getting 2 periods off your class. That's not a good model. So anyway, but hopefully that answers that a little bit. That's very much my viewpoint. So Crystal, any other questions?
That's it for now. Thanks, Kev.
No worries. Thanks again for committing to the webinar today. I know school's busy place with the reports at the moment. Hopefully you found it useful. If you're at EduTech, come and make yourself known to me. I'd love to see some of those faceless names I see in the attendees there. So, but thanks again. Okay, I'll stop the recording now and exit the meeting.